This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Use the links in the description to visit their store. 1 mana is a super small investment in Magic, so you often don't expect anything that powerful when you spend so little mana. Maybe you get a 2/1 with some abilities or something, but most of those aren't really capable of having a massive impact on the game. And one thing 1-drops almost never have is flying. You just don't get an evasive creature when you spend so little mana. However, it's pretty great when you do, because you get to add to the board on turn 1 while playing a creature that can likely attack for a while. And things get even better when your 1-mana flyer has some additional abilities to go along with it. To be eligible for this MTG Top 10, a card had to cost 1 mana and have flying with minimal setup. This means a card like Dragon's Rage Channeler doesn't qualify. It gets flying in most games to be sure, but it doesn't have it often enough on turn 1 or 2 to really qualify as a 1-mana flyer to me. In all, there were 71 cards eligible for this video, and in it, we'll take a look at the 10 1-mana flyers that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. But before we get to the list, let me tell you about this video's special sponsor, Into the AM. They've been sponsoring content here on the channel regularly for a few years now, and that's great because it means I get to tell you about their great products. They're an apparel company with all kinds of great stuff. They're probably best known for their graphic tees, but they've greatly expanded their offerings over the last few years, to the point that you can now just get your entire wardrobe there if you wanted to. They have jeans, coats, hoodies, and button-up shirts like the one I'm wearing now. No matter what you buy from them, you get bold, high-quality, comfortable clothing that you'll feel good wearing. Right now, they're having their Memorial Day sale, and as we get closer to summer, it's a great time to buy comfortable, breathable clothes, and that's true of almost everything they sell. Right now, items on their website are on sale for up to 70% off, and if you use my link in the description and use the code NEETSAHONE at checkout, you'll get an additional 10% off. Alright, let's get back to the video. Here's a quick reminder on how I rank cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like Regional Championships. At number 10, it's Phoenix Chick. It costs 1 red mana for a 1/1 with flying and haste that can't block, and it can come back from the graveyard whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures and you pay 2 red mana, and if you do that, it returns to the battlefield tapped and attacking with a +1/+1 counter on it. This powerful little 1-drop has the distinction of being the only card on both the 1-drops with haste video and this one. Interestingly, it was number 5 on the haste list and only number 10 on this one, so it's safe to say 1-mana flyers have been better over the years than 1-mana haste creatures have. Anyway, this is a very powerful design. It can attack for a lot longer than most 1-mana haste creatures because of flying, and if it ever goes down, you can bring it back bigger and better than ever before, and if you're bringing this Phoenix back while you're making a big attack, it can often tip the scales in your favor in a big way. All of that has made the Chick a good 1-drop for red aggro decks in Standard, and it's still seeing play in Standard and Pioneer red aggro decks. Phoenix Chick is probably going to continue to put up top 8s, although it's not doing so at an incredible rate or anything, so it's definitely possible for it to lose its spot on the list in the long run. At number 9, it's Judge's Familiar. For a white-blue hybrid mana, this 1-mana 1/1 flyer also comes with an activated ability. You can sacrifice it to counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1 generic mana. It's pretty sweet that you can roll this out on turn 1 and attack with it while it can get in for damage, and then later in the game it can be cashed in to counter a spell. And it's the kind of card that has an impact on the game even when you don't use the ability, because your opponent has to wait until they get 1 more mana to even cast their instants and sorceries, otherwise they are effectively turning their spell into a mediocre removal spell that kills your 1/1 flyer. And making opponents take 1 more turn to cast board sweepers or spot removal is a huge deal. The fact it has a hybrid cost also means it can be played in a wide variety of decks. Sure, you can play it in blue-white where it'll be super easy to cast, but any deck with white or blue can play it without too much trouble. For example, in both Block and Standard, it was played in Selesnya and Boros aggro decks. While it's done the most by far in Standard, where it was most frequently featured in Devotion to Blue, it's actually put up at least 2 points in every single Magic format it's ever been legal in, always appearing in aggro decks like Pioneer, Boros, Convoke. In Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, it's been featured in Hate Bear and Death and Taxes decks, which are creature decks that run aggressive disruptive creatures, and the Judge's Familiar fits great there. Most recently, however, it's been played in Pauper White Weenie decks. Pauper is a format where only commons are legal, and the Familiar only became legal there in the last year with a common reprint in Ravnica Remastered. Judge's Familiar is going to continue to put up top 8s in Pauper, and its multi-format success makes it difficult to ever count it out of any format entirely. At number 7, it's Xantid Swarm. Not all 1-mana flyers are designed to do damage, as we'll see with a few other creatures on this list, and Xantid Swarm definitely isn't. That's because it's 1 green mana for a 0/1 flyer, but it does have a really nice attack trigger that makes it so the defending player can't cast spells this turn. While flying might not help this thing do damage, it does allow you to get this effect every turn much more easily than would be the case if it didn't have flying. The Swarm didn't see any play in Block Standard or Extended, but since 2007 it's played an important role in combo decks in the Eternal formats, and especially in Legacy. Combo decks often can't do their thing if the opponent can cast spells during their turn, as many combos can be broken by interaction. So combo decks love the idea that the opponent can't cast anything during their turn, because they usually go off in a single turn and win the game. Xantid Swarm helps protect your combo from your opponent, and it does it really cheaply. This is something that it's going to continue to do, especially in Legacy. At number 7, it's Mausoleum Wanderer. For 1 blue mana, it's a 1/1 flyer, and whenever another spirit enters under your control, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. You can also sacrifice the Wanderer to counter-target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays X, where X is Mausoleum Wanderer's power. The Wanderer is pretty close to being a strictly better Judge's Familiar. The one thing that prevents that comparison from being accurate is the fact that the Familiar's mana cost is more flexible, but if you're playing a mono blue deck, the Wanderer is definitely better, since it will often be bigger than a 1/1 flyer and it can even counter spells more effectively when it's bigger. With a card like this, it's no mystery what type of deck it's played in, since it's particularly potent alongside lots of spirits, which allow it to feel even more efficient than it already is. While it saw a bit of play in standard spirit decks, these decks didn't have access to enough awesome spirits to really have sustained success in the format, but it's been significantly more successful in both Pioneer and Modern, and is still seeing play in spirit decks in the former. It's pretty much the ideal 1-drop for those decks, so it may move higher on the list in the future. It's just so good at being aggressive and disruptive at the same time. At number 6, it's Spyglass Siren. For 1 blue mana, it's a 1/1 flyer, and when it enters, you create a map token. This is an artifact token that lets you pay 1 generic and tap it and sacrifice it, and target creature you control explores, but you can only activate it as a sorcery. So, when a creature explores, that means you reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, you put a +1/+1 counter on the creature, and you put the card back or put it into your graveyard. In other words, you either draw a card or get a counter and surveil 1. Both of those outcomes are pretty good since you're only spending 1 mana, and you get that value on top of the Siren simply being a solid 1 mana 1/1 flyer. You can use the map to explore with the Siren too, so it effectively ends up being a 2 mana 1/1 flyer that draws you a card, or a 2 mana 2/2 flyer that surveils 1, and those outcomes are all pretty darn good. And maps give you way more upside on top of that, like if your deck cares about artifacts, or sacrificing permanents, or targeting creatures. You get the picture. The Siren has been heavily played in blue tempo decks in both Standard and Pioneer since being printed. It just gives you so much value, so it's not going to stop seeing play anytime soon. At number 5, it's Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student. For 1 blue mana, she's a 0/3 flyer. Like Xantid Swarm, she's not about doing damage to the opponent, but she does still take advantage of her flying by having an attack trigger. In her case, she makes a clue token. That's already some pretty significant upside on a 1-drop, but the upside doesn't end there, not by a mile, because when you draw your 3rd card in a turn, which her clues can of course help you do, she transforms into a planeswalker called Tamiyo Seasoned Scholar. That's right, this is basically a 1 mana planeswalker, even if it does take some setup. She starts at 2 loyalty, has a +2 that makes it so creatures that attack you or your planeswalkers get -1/-0 until your next turn, a -3 that returns an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand, and if it's green, you add 1 mana of any color, and a -7 that draws you cards equal to half the number of cards in your library rounded up, and you get a no maximum hand size emblem. So, when she transforms, you're generally only going to be able to use her +2 that first turn, but that's fine because it bumps her loyalty up in a big way, and it makes it very hard for early game creatures to do much damage to her at all. You can take 2 paths at that point depending on the situation. If Tamiyo isn't going to be around long, you can fire off that -3 to get a good spell back from your graveyard, but if you've stabilized, you can work your way up to the -7 and effectively win the game. So yeah, Tamiyo is very strong, so it's a good thing she's from a Modern Horizons set, which means the only 60 card format she's legal in are Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, but even with those limitations, she has quickly amassed an impressive score. After all, despite just being printed in 2024, she's already number 5 on this list. This is because she's become very heavily played in both Modern and Legacy. In both formats, she's effectively a staple for blue decks. If the number of top 8 she has overall isn't enough to convince you she's seeing heavy play right now, let's go with a different metric. Over the last 2 months, she's appeared in 16% of all Modern decks and 36% of all Legacy decks. So yeah, it would not be very fruitful to talk about every single kind of deck she's played in because she's virtually played in every single blue deck and has made blue decks much better in both formats. This is because both formats have lots of ways to draw cards and make it really easy for her to transform, and this is especially true in Legacy, where the format-defining card is Brainstorm, already an incredible card, but it can also transform your Tamiyo single-handedly. Tamiyo is going to continue to put up top 8s, and it has a very real shot at one day being near the top of the list, or at least much higher on it. At number 4, it's Spectral Sailor. For 1 blue mana, it's a 1/1 with flash and flying, and you can pay 3 generic and a blue to draw a card. This gives you a nice early game evasive creature with some nice late game value. The Sailor has had a variety of homes in Standard, including Simic Flash and Blue-White Control, both decks that look to take advantage of the fact that you could leave mana up during your opponent's turn and still add to the board with a flash creature, or alternatively, if it's already in play, use it to draw cards. But its most powerful home was in Wilderness Reclamation decks. These decks abuse the mana Reclamation could generate in a variety of ways, and while drawing extra cards with the Sailor isn't as busted as many other things the deck could do, the deck was happy to have a mana sink that draws them cards to find themselves their win conditions. That deck was so good that Reclamation got banned out of the format, but the Sailor has also seen significant play in both Pioneer and Modern, where it's been played in Spirit decks alongside Mausoleum Wanderer. It also got a reprint in Foundations last year, making it legal in Standard once more, and as a result, it's been seeing plenty of play in Dimir Tempo decks, often alongside Spyglass Siren. The Sailor is still very actively putting up top 8s in both Standard and Pioneer, but the 3 cards ahead of it are all very active and have significant leads, and with Tamiyo Inquisitive Student putting up top 8s even more rapidly than the Sailor, it's more likely to lose ground on this list in the future than gain ground. At number 3, it's Gilded Goose. For 1 green mana, it's a 0/2 flyer that makes a food when it enters. You can also pay 1 generic and a green and tap it to make a food, and you can also tap it and sacrifice a food to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. In other words, this goose is a mana dork. And while it's a bit of a downside that it requires food to be a mana dork, it makes the first food for you, and can even make more food later in the game, something that comes in handy not only for mana, but also for gaining you life if you need to stabilize or helping you with food synergies. With all that power, it's no surprise that it's seen significant play in every format apart from Vintage. While the bulk of its points did come in Standard, it's also seen significant play outside of it, including in Pioneer's Sacrifice decks, which can generate extra value out of the Goose's ability to sacrifice and create food, with Igra Eater of All, and it's also been played in Modern Toolbox decks where it can help ramp you into bigger Court of Callings. In the past, it's also been played in Legacy decks like Bug Midrange. It's continuing to put up top 8s in both Modern and Pioneer, but the 2 cards ahead of it are outpacing it. At number 2, it's Delver of Secrets. This doesn't start out as a 1 mana flyer. It's 1 blue mana for a 1/1. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you reveal the top card of your library, and if it's an instant or sorcery, it transforms into Insectile Aberration, a 3/2 flyer. It's probably somewhat contentious that I chose to include this creature, but hear me out. It is significantly different from something like Dragon's Rage Channeler for 2 reasons. First, there's actually a face on this 1 mana double face card that comes with flying. Second, the Delver has flying on turn 2 more often than not, and certainly more often than Dragon's Rage Channeler does. It also takes only a single manaless action to transform, while the Channeler usually asks for a little more than that. Delver of Secrets has been successful in every format it's ever been legal in, and it's been especially impressive in Legacy, where it has long been the key 1-drop in tempo decks that are filled to the brim with spells, so they have no problem transforming the Delver consistently on turn 2, at which point they protect it and it wins them the game. Delver of Secrets is going to continue to rack up top 8s, especially in Legacy, so it's likely to remain number 2 on the list, but it has a long way to go to catch the number 1 card on the list, which is Birds of Paradise. Imagine this is one that many of you figured would be at number 1, and it turns out you're right. For 1 green mana, it's a 0/1 flyer that can tap for mana of any color. So, it's a lot like Gilded Goose, which was intentionally modeled after Birds of Paradise. It has less toughness and no extra abilities, but it can produce extra mana simply by tapping. It doesn't need to fiddle around with food. Birds of Paradise is as old as the game of Magic itself because it was printed in limited edition alpha. That means, along with Will-O-the-Wisp and Scrib Sprites, it's one of Magic's very first 1-mana flyers. It's been good since day one, too, showing up at Magic's very first competitive event, the 1994 World Championship, and in every single year since then, and we're talking about 32 years at this point, it's put up top 8s at Magic's highest level of competition. That's a distinction it really only holds with a handful of other cards, like Llanowar Elves, Lightning Bolt, and the Power 9. It's just super good to play out a Mana Dork on turn 1, it lets you play powerful spells before your opponent can, and this Mana Dork is arguably the best one ever because it can repeatedly produce mana of any color for only 1 mana without any setup. This has led to it seeing lots of play over the years, especially in Standard where it's frequently been reprinted, and Modern as well. Over the years, some decks have even managed to take real advantage of the fact that the birds can fly, like by putting equipment on it. Turns out these little birds can carry Sword of Fire and Ice into battle pretty effectively. Birds of Paradise is still putting up top 8s today, albeit not at the same kind of rate as Tamiyo, but it's likely to continue to put up lots and lots of top 8s going forward, so it'll be number 1 on this list for the next few years at least. So, those are Magic's best 1-mana flyers. If you like running out an evasive creature on turn 1, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card in the video. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you want to catch up on past videos, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.